In this episode, we talk about a recent meeting of the US, Australia, Japan, and India Quad. We also talk about netizens being disappointed with the uniform of the Indian contingent at the Paris Olympics. But first, we talk about the series of massive landslides that hit Wayanad yesterday. Hi, I am Niharika Nanda, and you are listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. Over 90 people were killed and 128 injured yesterday in a series of tragic landslides that hit Kerala's Wayanad district in the early hours of the day. While the rescue operations are underway, Chief Minister Pinarayi Vijayan declared a 2-day state of mourning for the loss of lives in the calamity. The first landslide occurred around 1 a.m., followed by another one at around 4:30 a.m., resulting in hundreds being trapped under the debris. The Indian Meteorological Department issued a red alert for the high-range Wayanad district and the neighbouring Malappuram, Kozhikode and Kannur districts, indicating extremely heavy rainfall. To learn how the disaster unfolded and everything that has happened since, we have Indian Express's Vivek Surendran joining us. Vivek, can you begin by telling us what happened in Wayanad yesterday?
Sure, Niharika. Early morning on Tuesday, between 1 a.m. and 6 a.m., multiple massive landslides struck Mepadi, Mundakai town, Vaitiri, Attamala, Nulpura, and Churalmala in Wayanad. These are all places in Wayanad, district of Kerala. Due to incessant rains, the first landslide struck Mundakai town around 1 a.m. and while rescue operations were going on there, a second massive landslide struck Churalmala near a school that was already functioning as a relief camp. Nearby houses and shops were also affected. Mundakai town and Churalmala are around 2 to 2.5 kilometers apart, and these two places were connected by two bridges, both of which were swept away. This cut the access to Mundakai town. On the other side of the Mundakai town is the Nilambur forests, so that side is completely inaccessible. Rescue teams eventually managed to reach Mundakai using ropes across the flooded regions after around 12 hours. It was a long effort to get there because the bridges were swept away. Wayanad, for those who don't know, is a hilly region with many tea estates, and the tea estates workers live in houses called lyams on these hills. Many of these lyams were destroyed by the rains and many were destroyed by landslides. And these are many estate workers who were trapped and killed.
And how many people have been impacted by the landslides? Can you share with us details of the fatalities and how many people have been injured?
It is difficult to give an exact figure, but the death toll, unfortunately, has already crossed at least 93. Kerala CM Pinarayi Vijayan has conducted a press conference and he said 93 bodies have been recovered so far. The toll is expected to go higher. Many reports say that some 400 families have been affected. And some reports say that 128 people are said to be missing even now. Anywhere between 800 to 1,000 people are stranded. So I think a ballpark of about 1,250 people have been affected.
And Vivek, how have the security forces and the emergency services responded to the incident? Talk to us about the rescue operations that are going on.
So the whole thing happened early morning around 1 a.m. And since the tragedy struck, many forces have been deployed. At least 2 teams of National Disaster Response Force, the NDRF, they were deployed early morning itself. By afternoon, another 4 teams of the NDRF must have reached the spots. 2 teams of Kannur Defence Security Corps, around 200 soldiers, also reached Wayanad in the morning itself. 2 Indian Air Force helicopters from the Sulur Air Base in Coimbatore have also been deployed. In addition to these, a canine squad of the Indian Army with Labradors and German Shepherds. These dogs are capable of smelling human remains and the faintest of breath under mud. These canine squad have also been deployed. Other than that, a team of officials from the Indian Naval Academy at Erimala also arrived in Wayanad for rescue operations. Kerala CM Vijayan had sought help of the Navy's river crossing team. I think this was when Mundakai was inaccessible from the other part. One report said the Madras Engineering Group from Bangalore will arrive to implement alternative arrangements after the bridge collapse. So all of these forces have been deployed.
Right, and we know that Prime Minister Narendra Modi expressed his concern over the incident. So talk to us about the kind of political reactions that the incident has prompted.
Of course. So Kerala CM Pinarayi Vijayan said a delegation of 5 ministers, Forest Minister, Ministers of Revenue, Public Works, Scheduled Castes and Scheduled Tribes departments, they've all been assigned to the Wayanad tragedy. All of them must be on the ground by now. And they've been on the ground for a few hours, if I'm not wrong. The government has also announced state mourning on July 30, which is today and tomorrow. All state programs have been cancelled and the national flag will be flown at half-mast. CM Vijayan is also monitoring all the efforts very closely from Trivandrum. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, like you said, expressed concern and announced an ex gratia payment of rupees 2 lakh from the Prime Minister's National Relief Fund for the families of every deceased individual and rupees 50,000 for those injured. He had tweeted in the morning and he also spoke to CM Vijayan and offered all support and assistance. Rahul Gandhi, who is also former MP from Wayanad and leader of opposition now, spoke about the tragedy in the Lok Sabha and he has urged the union government to provide all necessary support. He also suggested increasing the compensation amount and to release it promptly to the families of the deceased. Tamil Nadu CM M.K. Stalin announced that the state would give 5 crore rupees for the rehabilitation and rescue operations. He also said 2 teams of IAS officers along with a medical team comprising doctors, nurses will be sent to Kerala. And he also said a fire and rescue service personnel team will also be sent to Kerala. Another neighbor, Karnataka CM Siddaramaiah, also expressed grief over the loss of lives and said Karnataka is committed to providing all possible help to Kerala.
And Vivek, it has been reported that a lot of people have been trapped in resorts and hotels in and around Wayanad, while local people have been trying their best to contribute towards rescue operations. So talk to us a little bit about that.
As usual, when tragedy strikes, locals also join rescue operations. So it's true in this case as well. Many residents from the neighboring villages have joined the rescue efforts. But due to adverse weather conditions, incessant rain, strong currents, all of these have been hampering the rescue efforts. It is safe to assume that at least 1,000 people have been stranded across different places. At least 700 of them are stuck in an estate bungalow of the Harrison's Malayalam estate. This is in a region in Wayanad. Another 100 are trapped in the Tree Valley Resort in Mundakai town, which is also an affected area. And this 100 includes both Indian and foreign tourists. There are a lot of people stuck in some madrasa in Mundakai, and another 150 to 200 people are stranded in a resort in Mepadi. And I'm sure there are a lot of resorts that are already housing tourists from India and abroad. They must all be safe. And it is very often, especially in Kerala, that public open their doors of houses, resorts, hotels, hospitals, madrasas, schools, everything to turn it to relief camps and to house affected people. So I'm sure the same will be happening in Wayanad right now.
And are such landslides a common occurrence in Wayanad? And was there any prior intimation for the same?
Landslides are not uncommon during monsoons in the hilly regions of Kerala, whether it be Wayanad or Idukki. In 2022, the centre said that Kerala recorded the highest number of major landslides in the country, which is over 2239, which is a huge number. This year, however, northern part of Kerala, Kasaragod, Kannur, Wayanad is northeast of Kerala, but Wayanad, Calicut and Malappuram districts, they've been receiving insane amount of rainfall. The geologically weak soil was saturated after 2 weeks of rainfall, and the extreme heavy rain in Wayanad this morning and since last evening in Wayanad, Calicut, Malappuram, these resulted in the localized landslides that led to the tragedy. Landslides are also common in Idukki district. Every year we hear news of landslides wreaking havoc in Kerala. Red alerts have been issued for 5 or 6 districts in Kerala for heavy rains. And there have been orange alert for another 4 or 5 districts. So almost all of Kerala is facing massive rains.
And next we talk about the meeting of the US, Australia, Japan and India Quad. On 29th July, US, Australia, Japan and India met for a Quad meeting in Tokyo. As External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar met with US Secretary of State Antony J. Blinken, Japanese Foreign Minister Yogo Kamikawa, And Australia's Penny Wong in Tokyo, the Quad reaffirmed its, quote, steadfast commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific, vowing to work towards a region where no country dominates others and each state is free from coercion in all its forms, unquote. This meeting happened 3 weeks after Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. To learn more about the Quad, why was it formed and its current significance, we have Indian Express's diplomatic affairs editor Shubhajit Roy joining us. Shubhajit, can you begin by talking about the US, Australia, Japan and India Quad? When was it formed and its current significance?
Yeah, so, Niharika, the Quad is the quadrilateral grouping of US, India, Australia and Japan, which was first thought of and started in the year 2007. But then it didn't sort of take off at that point of time. And then in 2017, when US President Trump was in power, and at that point of time, the Quad grouping was once again revived. And since then, initial years, it started at the official level. Then it was upgraded to the foreign ministers level. And then when after US President Joe Biden came to power in 2020, in 2021, he upgraded it to the level of the president and prime minister's level, the leaders level. So earlier this year, India was supposed to host the Quad summit, but it couldn't happen. And for that, US President Joe Biden was supposed to travel here, but that didn't happen. So now the Quad foreign ministers of the Quad grouping, they met here, in Tokyo. And for that, External Affairs Minister Jaishankar and his counterparts from US, Australia and Japan, they all gathered in Tokyo.
And Shubhajit, talk a little bit about the reasons behind why this particular combination of countries came together to create this Quad.
Essentially, these are like-minded democracies. That's how they frame themselves. And the sort of unstated reason or the elephant in the room is China. So essentially, because of Beijing's or China's assertion in the South China Sea, in the Indo-Pacific, it became very apparent to these four countries which, came together, and they started sort of meeting and developing a partnership where they could assert themselves against Beijing. They're working on several areas, from technology to vaccines to maritime security. So on all these issues, they talk, and they also have capacity building exercises. So these are sort of some of the areas where the four countries have been cooperating. So that's how the Quad foreign ministers met this time, to take stock of the grouping's activities and then also plan for the Quad Leaders Summit, which is expected to be held in India, they said, later this year.
And we know that Prime Minister Narendra Modi very recently visited Russia and met President Vladimir Putin. So what significance does that hold as far as this Quad is concerned and the recent meeting that happened?
So Prime Minister Modi visited Russia in early July, on 8th and 9th of July. And, that is one area of divergence between India and its three Quad partners, that is US, Australia and Japan, where, US, Australia and Japan have condemned Russia for the invasion of Ukraine and have also joined in the sanctions. But India has sort of had to diplomatic balance between Russia and the West, that is the Quad partners. So when Prime Minister Modi visited Russia, the US especially conveyed its concerns, especially since, around that time, on the 9th to 11th, the NATO Leaders Summit was being held in Washington, D.C., which is being hosted by President Biden. So from that perspective, there's been a divergence. So it was very important for India to hold a meeting of the Quad foreign ministers and also sort of try to balance the visit to Russia by the Prime Minister with a Quad meeting at the foreign ministers level, where it signaled that it was trying to balance between the two sides, and it was expressing its concerns about the Russian, invasion of Ukraine without explicitly condemning it, but at least saying that this is not the era of war, which it had said before. Also said that solutions can't be found on the battlefield, and it also expressed its concern at the killing of the children in children's hospital, which was targeted by the Russians. India, in fact, joined the Quad partners in expressing its concern, its deepest concern at the invasion of Ukraine. And also sort of it flagged the issue of respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity. Of course, without mentioning Russia anywhere, but it mentioned about the war raging in Ukraine.
And what did the Quad say in its statement regarding the growing influence of China in the Indo-Pacific region and beyond?
Well, Niharika, with Beijing as the principal challenge, Quad is trying to paper over the differences and make a case for cooperation. So, on China's aggressive behavior, for example, the joint statement clearly said that we reaffirm the Quad's steadfast commitment to a free and open Indo Pacific, which is inclusive and resilient, and are united in our commitment to holding the free and open rules based international order. With its strong support for the principle of freedom, human rights, rule of law, democratic values, sovereignty, and territorial integrity, and peaceful settlement of disputes and prohibition on the threat or use of force in accordance with the UN Charter. It also further adds all countries have a role in contributing to regional peace, stability, and prosperity, while seeking a region in which no country dominates and no country is dominated. Competition is managed responsibly, and each country is free from coercion in all its forms and can exercise its agency to determine its own future. So essentially, just saying that China, all these sort of issues of principle of freedom, human rights, democratic values, and peaceful settlement of disputes, all or the fact that there should be no threat or no threat of use of force, all these point towards China's behavior in the Indo-Pacific. So essentially, China's aggressive behavior in the region has become the strategic glue between the Quad partners. And that was what was the big takeaway, big picture that came out. In fact, when they talked about the South China Sea, they said that we are seriously concerned about the situation in the East and South China Seas and reiterate our strong opposition to any unilateral actions that seek to change the status quo by force or coercion. So essentially, they all were together in voicing their concerns about China's aggressive behavior in the Indo-Pacific region.
And Shubhajit, what did External Affairs Minister S. J. Shankar say post the meeting?
Well, he said that, the countries are like-minded partners and they do share the fact that the overall messaging is that the four countries are all democratic polities, pluralistic societies, and market economies, and are working together for a free and open Indo-Pacific, for a rules-based order, and for global good. So that by itself, Jaishankar said, is a powerful stabilizing factor in an uncertain and volatile world. Essentially trying to say that, China has been a sort of a disruptor in these aspects. And because these are all democracies, they are coming together to give a message to China, which is extremely aggressive in the region, especially when it comes to its neighbors. And India knows about it because it is the only Quad country which shares a land border with China.
And talking about another important issue that the Quad touched upon, which you mentioned beforehand as well, the Russia-Ukraine war. So what did the Quad statement say regarding it?
India did join hands with the Quad partners where, they all said that we express our deepest concern over the war raging in Ukraine, including its terrible and tragic humanitarian consequences. We reiterate the need for a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in line with international law, consistent with the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, including respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity. So essentially, this formulation of respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity is not used by India in its national statements on the Russia-Ukraine war. So that is a significant framing from India's perspective. The joint statement also said that we also note the negative impacts of the war in Ukraine with regard to global food and energy security, especially for developing and least developed countries, which is essentially the global south that India sort of represents, and India had held the summits of the voice of the global south. In the context of this war, the joint statement said that we share the view that the use or threat of use of nuclear weapons is unacceptable. You remember that India had expressed its concerns on the nuclear threats issued by top Russian leaders, including Russian President Vladimir Putin. And this is that reference we're talking about. The joint statement goes on to say that we underscore the importance of upholding international law and, in line with the UN Charter, reiterate that all states must refrain from the threat of or use of force against the territorial integrity and sovereignty or political independence of any state. So essentially clearly hinting at Russia's invasion of Ukraine without actually naming Russia anywhere in the joint statement.
And Shubhajit, External Affairs Minister S. Shankar recently met with his Chinese counterpart at the ASEAN meet. So how were China-India relations discussed in that particular meeting?
This was their second meeting in the last few months, and I think it's the fourth in a year. And it tells you that the two countries are trying to talk to each other to de-escalate the tension, to disengage at the border and de-escalate the wider region. But there has not been much progress. There are still areas where the disengagement hasn't happened and the standoff still continues. So it's in the interest of the two countries, and especially definitely India, to resolve the dispute. And as long as India holds this position that the border standoff will have an impact on the bilateral relations, it will be very difficult for the government to disengage and de-escalate from the heights from the region in Eastern Ladakh.
And in the end, we talk about the netizens' reactions towards the uniforms of the Indian contingent at the Paris Olympics. The uniform of the Indian contingent at the Paris Olympics has created quite the buzz amongst netizens. Indian Express's Rinku Ghosh reports that Indians on social media are terming the uniform as tacky, underwhelming, and as an injustice to Indian weaving traditions and motifs. They are saying that it required putting in more thought and time into making sporting attire an extension of brand India. This was the first time that the responsibility to create the uniform for Team India was entrusted to a designer, Tarun Tahilyani, via Taswa, the premium affordable menswear label launched by him and Aditya Birla Fashion and Retail Limited. This works as a partnership between the Indian Olympic Committee and the designer or the design house contracted after a fair bid. The aspirant agency should be qualified enough to create a visual motif that can strengthen brand India and at the same time have enough money and resources to execute it. That's why every design house and sportswear brand vies for this contract with their respective country Olympic committees around the world. The dress code this year has been sari, salwar suits, bandkalas, turbans and blazers for the athletes. The government has so far used designers for uniforms of the national carrier, Air India and Khadi Promotion. According to Rinku, the criticism was also seen around Tahilyani's use of cotton instead of silk and the use of digital ikat prints instead of weaves and embroideries, with some interpreted as an insult to our handloom and handcrafting traditions. In response, Tarun Tahilyani said, quote, "A designer has to follow a set of guidelines put out by the Indian Olympic Committee. The team has to factor in colors of the tricolour, as most countries follow their flag because it's all that is visible from afar. The current design was chosen by a vetting committee from multiple sketches and multiple options." Unquote. He added that there was a lot of to and fro, amendments and fittings for the 300-member squad of athletes and officials. Many things were changed at the last minute and he and his team had to work again on it and add a little more colour as he saw the athletes from far away. Responding to the criticism regarding why he didn't use cotton, Tahilyani said, quote, "Paris can be boiling hot in July, that's why the athletes are in cotton and viscose crepe so that they could breathe easily. I used contemporary silhouettes of the bundi jacket and the pre-pleated sari. They are not only comfortable and functional but also represent a fine balance of tradition with modernity. It would have been easy for me to send them in Zardozi vests, but that was not appropriate for the occasion. In the end, our athletes looked good, supported the tricolour, and were cohesive and cool. It's not a wedding, it's a sport. As for the criticism regarding the ikat weaves, he said that they used the prints that could be executed within 3 weeks, which was the timeline given to them. You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by me, Niharika Nanda. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.